Bible Answers with Dr. Al Garza.
All right, welcome back to Bible Answers. I am your host, of course, Dr. Al Garza. And in today's broadcast, I'll be dealing with a video link that was sent to me and was asking my opinion, my thoughts on this regarding the word Elohim in connection with what we call the Trinity. The Father, Son, Spirit, three persons who are one God. And this comes about because this gentleman here from Prove All Things, and I believe the ministry is, of course, Revelation 14:12.org. They put out a video a while back and trying to explain how the word Elohim has nothing to do with the Trinity. It's never connected to that way with the one true God. And so that was disturbing to me because myself, who's very well trained in the Hebrew language, I'm an associate scholar in linguistic context of the Bible from Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek. And so I'm very well familiar with the word Elohim in the Hebrew, with Adonai and the singular El or Eloah, and of course the Yod He Vav He, the name of God. And so when I saw this video, I was quite disturbed. This gentleman has no idea what the Hebrew says. He has no idea how to read the Hebrew. He doesn't know how to read the Hebrew, period. He has no idea what the word Elohim and how it's used for the one true God versus the other gods. He simply is repeating what he has researched himself and found through lexicons or through other scholars who kind of just tells him what he wants to hear. And I'm going to show you and demonstrate how this person has no clue what he's talking about as regards to the word Elohim. And I'm saying that straight out because I'm going to show you from the Hebrew itself. You can look this up yourself with any interlinear Hebrew if you want, or if you know how to read Hebrew, check out the text. Or if you know somebody who does know Hebrew, show them these passages we're going to go over, and you'll see for yourself that what I'm telling you is in direct contradiction to what this gentleman says. The Hebrew text is clear with the word Elohim. And I'm going to show you something you've never probably heard before, something you've never were taught before. If you've been through seminary or through university learning Hebrew biblical studies, what I'm about to share with you might not have been maybe taught to you or explained regarding the name Elohim and its usage in the Hebrew, in the Torah, the first 5 books and beyond, which led me to write a book on this topic, which I'll share with you later. So I want to first show you what he says in the beginning here, and we're going to kind of break it up here in little pieces. It's an 8-minute video, but I'm going to kind of, or maybe about a 10-minute video, but I'm going to break it up at certain parts and just focus on some of the things he said that either he's very ignorant of or he's just flat out lying, which I just think he's ignorant of this just from what he's saying. So let's start from here. Let's go to the first part here at 117, and I want to kind of focus on something here. So let's look at what he says at 117. I'll bump back to about one right out here, and we'll go here.
The word Elohim is the plural form of the Hebrew word El and Eloah, which is the word for God. Because it is plural, it is claimed that this signifies that God is some kind of a plurality, most popularly the Trinity. Is the Trinity in Genesis 1? What is the meaning of Elohim? And does it only have a plural meaning?
Okay, so right off the bat, yes, there's singular and plurals to pretty much many Hebrew names and titles of God. If we look at El or Eloah, that's singular for the mighty one, for God himself. Elohim, it could be translated, if the word Elohim by itself appears and there's nothing else, there's no modifiers in the Hebrew or anything, yeah, it would be rendered gods, literal translation gods, or in the third person plural, they are God. El or Eloah is God singular. So the question remains is just like the word, the plural for Yod He Vav He, the very name of God, the plural form of that is Adonai, not Adoni, but Adonai. So when you see the word Adonai, and we're gonna kind of talk about how that is read in the Hebrew with the kamet and even in one particular unique case with the patach. So when you see Adonai, you know it's the plural form of Yod He Vav He. So the questions we're going to talk about here is how it's used in every sense for the name of God in both singular and plural, if it's so. So with that, he's kind of giving us a basic understanding of the plural and singular, which he's going to use through Brown, Driver, and Briggs in a minute here. So let's continue and see what he says on this.
Answer is no. Here is how Brown, Driver, Briggs Hebrew lexicon defines it. As plural when referring to rulers, judges, divine ones, angels, and gods. That's the meaning many people read in Genesis 1, that it's referring to a plurality, that God is more than one. But there is another meaning. Number 2, plural intensive, singular meaning, God, goddess, godlike one, works or special possessions of God, and the true God. It says that this meaning, the singular, is applicable to the true God. Most times Elohim refers to the true God and other times to the gods of the heathen. Even though it is a plural word, it does have a singular meaning. The context and grammar in Genesis 1:1 is clear that it.
Now, we're going to look at this. Actually, let him finish this Genesis 1:1. We're going to talk about this, how he's only focusing on that one verse.
Singular in meaning. This is self-evident from the fact that the verb created, in Hebrew bara, is in the singular. Thus, it denotes greatness and majesty rather than plurality.
Okay, so he's looking at Genesis 1:1, Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et ha'eretz. He's looking at Bereshit bara Elohim. Bara being the third person singular, he created, which would modify the Elohim plural to a singular form and a more of a majestic form. And this is true if you look at basic Hebrew grammar, the verb that precedes the noun, if that noun like Elohim is plural, and the verb is singular in form, whether it be first person singular, second person, third person singular, in this case bara, it would modify Elohim to a singular God. So it'd be literally in the beginning, he created. Who? God. Now we can debate that if that's exactly how Moses understood it, because Hebrew grammar is, we don't know how far Hebrew grammar was understood. We can kind of play with that, but we don't need to in this case. So he's looking at this one part. And of course, every Hebrew scholar knows that the word is modified by the verb. It's nothing new here. But what he's going to say in a little bit here is going to be kind of showing his ignorance to how these verbs work, as far as also understanding that all he's doing is quoting lexicons and other people that obviously never have understood how Elohim is used for one true God, even with plural verbs, which there is. And he's going to flatly deny this. So let's continue on with the next point, where he's going to quote, I believe he's going to talk about 358 here. No, he's going to talk about 244, referring to Moses here. Let's see what he says about the Moses as an example. 244. I'll let it run a little bit, because here's what he got to say.
There are many examples of how the plural Elohim can be used to convey a singular meaning. In Exodus 7:1, God actually calls Moses Elohim. And the Lord said unto Moses, See, I have made thee a god to Pharaoh, and Aaron thy brother shall be thy prophet. Why would God use the plural word Elohim when talking about Moses?
Well, let's stop there. Let's pull this up into the Hebrew here. And of course, he reads it, of course, as, and the Lord said to Moses, I have made you a god to Pharaoh. Now, in the Hebrew, though, the translation in King James or other translations didn't do this justice in particular, and I don't know why. But in Hebrew, of course, Vayomer Adonai el Moshe re'e netatecha Elohim la Pharaoh. And the Lord said to Moses, See, I gave you God to Pharaoh. I have given you God to Pharaoh. I have given you Elohim. This should be translated as I have given you powers or godlike powers unto Pharaoh. Why do I say that? It's because the word Elohim also means powers, or in a singular form, El, a mighty power. It just doesn't mean gods. It can be translated as power or powers in the plural. And the Hebrew, Neta Techa Elohim, I give you Elohim. I give you Elohim. I give you powers. I give you God. It's not I made you or I have made you Elohim. It's I give you Elohim. So the difference here is understanding that God is giving Moses God powers to present like Moses in a godlike way. It's not that he made him God or Elohim, but he gave him power. That's how the literal Hebrew reads. I give you Elohim. Or I gave you Elohim. So again, this is just not understanding Hebrew. If he read it directly from the Hebrew, he would say it's not says I made you. Let's continue on, because this goes on to what more he has to say in the sense in 632. So here he's misrepresenting the Hebrew here, but let's move on to 632, and I want to focus on what he says here. Okay. Now this is very interesting.
our image.
There is absolutely no evidence that the Jews conceived of or used the word Elohim to convey the idea of God being plural or more than one person. After all, they are more familiar with Hebrew. It is their language.
Yes, it is our language. Being a Jew and knowing the language, yes, it is. And he's absolutely wrong. There is evidence, clear evidence of this. In fact, we're going to reveal this evidence at the end of this video. I'm going to show you where the first time Elohim is spoken. If you don't know this, here's something, a little pop quiz. Who first spoke the name Elohim to God himself, the Almighty? And what verb did he use, a singular or plural verb? That's the question. That's the $1,000,000 question. Who was the first person to speak the name Elohim with a verb? And was it with the singular or plural form? And if so, in either or, why? And this is something he does not know. He makes this blunt statement saying, oh, there's absolutely no evidence. And the Jews who themselves, yeah, those who know Hebrew, we know they're there. Now, there are Jews who might read this and then reinterpret it, but they can't get away from the verb modifiers that change it to when speaking to the Almighty, Yod He Vav He. So this is complete ignorance. It's nonsense here. And let's continue, because I want to make another point here where he says in 709, he kind of emphasizes this even a little more. And here's what he has to say.
To false gods. So the inspired Bible authors recognize that the God of the Bible is a single individual being, one person. That is how they understood and translated the word Elohim. The problem exists today because people unfamiliar with the Hebrew language are quick to jump to Trinitarian conclusions. It is common knowledge today for those who are familiar with Hebrew that the word Elohim does not even hint at a plurality of God or Trinity.
False again. Those of us who do know Hebrew know that it does point to a Trinity, and I'm going to demonstrate this very clearly. And it does point to God being plural with the title and the verbs behind it to modify it. This person does not know what he's talking about. He has no clue. And this is the sad thing, is that people buy into this as if he's talking with authority. He has none. I can tell from what he's saying he does not know Hebrew, and I'm going to show you in a little bit. I want to finish this so we can actually correct this gentleman's complete lack of understanding the text.
Here it is from Smith's Bible Dictionary. The fanciful idea that it referred to the Trinity of persons in the Godhead hardly finds now a supporter among scholars. This is just representative of countless other quotes and sources, both Hebrew and Christian, that affirm the same thing. Even Trinitarian scholars are honest enough to admit that Elohim does not support a plurality of persons in the God of the Bible. Here is how one scholar puts it.
My name is Jiří Moskala, and I am professor of Old Testament exegesis and theology. There are some people who would like to say that the term Elohim, term for God, is already an allusion to the Trinity. Well, here we need to be more careful. We cannot say that because it's in the plural form, therefore it's an indication for the Trinity. And is it an argument in favor of Trinity? And I have to say here, no, it is not. Unfortunately, no.
So in conclusion, the word Elohim is a fitting and appropriate title for the true and living God. It doesn't mean that he is more than one person, but it does mean that he is the fullness of majesty and greatness.
All right, let's cut this off. This is kind of irritating me here. The scholar, I don't know who this person is. I can tell you from what he's saying, he could be an Old Testament scholar all he wants, but when you challenge us on the Hebrew aspect of it, this guy does not know what he's talking about, this Old Testament scholar, and I would love to sit down with these people and challenge them on these texts I'm about to show you. First thing I want to establish is here is, look, there is an Elohim, what I titled this, Elohim, the First Trinity, in the book of Genesis. And it begins, and I'm going to show you something before we get to these texts in the Hebrew, where we get this from. Now, we're going to go to Abraham first, because Abraham, people can answer the Genesis like he does, the us, the our, the we's, and Moses, as Moses is writing back to creation. But I want to focus on Abraham, the first one that God appears to directly, and reveals himself in a way that most people don't see in the English translation, but it jumps out in the Hebrew. Now, if you look at Genesis 12, you see the first time it says, "Now the Lord said to Abraham, go forth from your country and from your relatives and from your father's house." So it's the first time here that the Lord speaks to Abraham, tells him to go forth from your country and from your relatives and to leave your father's house and go, and I will bless you, and I will make you great among the nations, and so forth. All this, the covenant that he's making with Abraham about blessing him with the land. So you see right away that God is speaking here. And then in verse 6, now the Canaanite then in the land was in the land. The Lord appeared to Abraham and said, to your descendants I will give this land. So he built an altar there to the Lord who had appeared to him. So now the Lord did appear to him. This is Yod-Heh-Vav appearing to Abraham, speaking to Abraham, telling him to leave his father's house. Keep that in mind. This is the first time that God tells Abraham to leave his father's house and promises the land. Okay, so this is it. Now, moving forward a few chapters, in chapter 15, here's another appearance, but it's Moses words it differently. After these things, the word of the Lord came to Abraham in a vision, saying, do not fear, Abram, I am a shield to you. Your reward shall be very great. Abraham said, O Lord God. Now, literally in the Hebrew, it's more of Yod-Heh-Vav or Adonai, Yod-Heh-Vav. He compounded both of them with the singular of Yod-Heh-Vav, he exists, and the plural Adonai. So he brings this together. So, O Lord God, or O Adonai Yod-Heh-Vav. So this is where the word of the Lord appears to him and says, don't fear. This is not the same as Genesis 12. This is the construct state in Hebrew that the word of the Lord is Yod-Heh-Vav, and Yod-Heh-Vav is the word. They are the same. They are the same as far as the person. So you have Yod-Heh-Vav appearing in chapter 12, and the word appearing in chapter 15. And he appears to him and does the same thing, promises the covenant and so forth, and all those things. Now, this is the first two appearances, and one is Yod-Heh-Vav, the other is the word, and then you have in a little bit here, you're going to have in chapter 16, the very next chapter, the messenger of Yod-Heh-Vav, or the angel of the Lord, but not a good translation. The messenger of Yod-Heh-Vav appears to Hagar and speaks to Hagar, and Moses, the writer, says that says in verse 13 in chapter 16, then she called the name of Yod-Heh-Vav who spoke to her, you are El, who sees, or who sees all, who sees everything about me. For she says, I have even remained alive here after seeing him. So Moses says that the messenger of Yod-Heh-Vav, who was Yod-Heh-Vav himself speaking to Hagar, and that appearance as a messenger, and that Hagar identified that person as El. So you have Yod-Heh-Vav in 12, 15, you have the word, and you have the messenger in 16, and then moving forward in chapter 18:1, it says, now the Lord appeared to him, speaking to Abraham, by the oaks of Mamre, while he was sitting at the tent door in the heat of the day. When he lifted up his eyes and looked, behold, 3 men were standing opposite of him. And when he saw them, he ran from the tent door to meet them and bowed himself to the earth and said, Al Adonai, or Adonai. He uses the very name of God without the compound Yod-Heh-Vav. It was just Adonai, the plural form, to these 3 men. Now, this is how the Hebrew reads. You can reinterpret it all you want. The point is, Yod-Heh-Vav appears. Abraham sees 3 men, runs to greet them. And how does he greet them? He bows himself down and says, O Adonai, the very name of God in plural form. And this is exactly how it reads in the Hebrew. In fact, in the Hebrew here, it's the very name Adonai in plural, representing Yod-Heh-Vav. And what do you have? You have in verse 5, they speak as one, and they said. In verse 5, verse 9, and they said to him, again, Yod-Heh-Vav as one, speaking, they said. And then you have the whole conversation all the way down. But what I want to focus on, and you can read this in my book, which I'll show you a little later how you can get a copy of it, where I break all this down and shows that how God himself asks a question to himself, and then he answers his own question. And he says, who will go down And then Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh says that God says, I will go down, I will descend and see in Sodom. And what happens? The two men get up and leave. And so from 18, you have three there, three persons who appeared as Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. And Abraham bows down to meet them and greet them as Adonai, the plural name of God. Lot did the same thing in 19 in the Hebrew, which is the English translations really don't show this, which is disturbing. But in 19, when the two men got up and went down there, it says, now the two messengers came to Sodom in the evening as Lot was sitting at the gate of Sodom. When Lot saw, he rose to meet them, same thing like Abraham, and bowed down his face to the ground, and he said, now behold, Adonai, please turn aside into your servant's house. Now, if your translation says my lords and my masters, it's a poor translation. The Hebrew word is still Adonai. The difference is the small markings under the nun in the Hebrew of a little dash, which is called a patach in Hebrew, which is a shorter A sound, which is the kametz, and the original Adonai is a longer A sound. So this is, and here's the thing, this is the only time in the entire Hebrew Bible where Adonai is presented with a patach, not a kametz, but it's still the same pronunciation, Adonai. Instead of this is being used with a short A sound. Why did the scribes do this? I don't know, but in the Leningrad Codex, in the Leningrad Codex, you can see in the footnotes that this is the only place ever that a patach is used for Adonai, not a kametz, and it's not Adoni. It's a different vowel point. So Lot referred to them with Adonai the same way. In fact, to prove this, in the same chapter in chapter 19, verse 20, in 19 verses 18. Well, let's start at 17. When they had brought them outside, when the messengers brought them outside, Lot and his family, they had brought him outside, and he said, escape for your life, do not look behind you, and do not stay anywhere in the valley. Escape to the mountains, or you will be swept away. But Lot said to them, Lot is speaking to the two messengers, oh no, Adonai. Now this is the Adonai, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, that Abraham uses, that's used in all the scriptures with the kametz, the long A sound, the original Adonai of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, the plural form. So he uses the plural form without the Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh compound. He says, he didn't say, oh Adonai Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. He says, oh Adonai. Behold, your servant has, if I found favor in your sight, and you have magnified your loving kindness, which you have shown me by saving my life, but I cannot escape to the mountain, for the disaster will overtake me. In other words, he says, do not let me go there. But the point is this. Lot addressed both messengers as Adonai twice. Okay? Just like Abraham did. And that's why in verse 23 of Genesis 19 it says, the sun had risen over the earth when Lot came to Zohar. Then the Lord rained. Then Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh rained on Sodom and Gomorrah brimstone and fire from Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh out of heaven. These are all three. The God who stayed with Abraham and who left Abraham after they were compromised, they were discussing if he would allow God not to destroy them for 10 righteous and so forth. Then you have the two messengers who are also Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, Adonai here, and it says, that's when it says, God, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, rained on Sodom and Gomorrah, brimstone and fire from Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh out of heaven. All three are spoken of in verse 24. There's no way around this. But here is the nail in the coffin. And I'm going to tell you this. From this point on, Abraham never referred to God as Elohim from this point on, not once. He always used the Adonai or Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. So the question is, when did Abraham use Elohim? And when he did use it, did he use a singular or plural verb? That is $1 million question. Because if Abraham first spoke the name Elohim, how did he use it? Which would tell us if he really meant what I just mentioned here, the three men being God himself revealed as Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh S3. So let's look at this from the Hebrew. We're going to go here to Genesis chapter 20. Now, if you want the story, of course, you can look at Genesis 20, where you can look at Abraham's journey, and he gets Abimelech captures, talks to Abraham, Abraham lies and says Sarah is not his wife and so forth. And then Abimelech takes her, but he hadn't been with her yet. And verse 4, now Abimelech had not come near her, and he said, Lord, will you slay a nation even blameless? Because the Lord has showed him in a vision or dream that he has taken, Abraham's wife. Because he says in verse 6, then God said to him in a dream, yes, I know that I'm integrity of your heart. You have done this, and I also kept you from sinning against me. Therefore, I did not let you touch her. Now, therefore, restore the man's wife, for he is a prophet. So God tells Abimelech what to do. Now, when they're discussing, when Abimelech is telling Abraham, why did you do this, in a sense, it says, Abimelech said to Abraham, what have you encountered that you have done this thing? Abraham said, because I thought surely there is no fear of God in this place, and they will kill me because of my wife. Besides, she actually is my sister, the daughter of my father, another half-sister, but not the daughter of my mother, and she became my wife. Now, verse 13 says in English, and it came about when God caused me to wander from my father's house. Abraham tells Abimelech that God caused me to wander or to leave from my father's house. Now, did Abraham identify? This is the first time Abraham speaks the name Elohim, right here in verse 13, the first time. And if you look at it in the Hebrew, and of course it says, Vayahi ka'asher hitu oti Elohim mebayit avi. And it came to pass when they caused me to leave my father's house. They caused me. When Elohim, God, they caused me to leave my father's house. That's how the Hebrew reads, a third person plural in Hebrew. Abraham first spoke the name Elohim with a plural verb. Why did Abraham do that if those appearances were not God in plural form? Again, from the Hebrew, Hitu oti Elohim bayit avi. They caused me, God, they caused me to leave my father's house. So, the very first time Abraham speaks the name Elohim to Abimelech, he uses it with the plural verb. And that's not the first time. It continues on. In my book, My Presence, They Will Go, The Faces of God, I deal with the number of plural verbs used to identify Elohim or to modify it when speaking of God himself, the Almighty, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. And I document this, what I just mentioned here in this book and all the other places where even God himself refers to himself as his presence or face. It's they. He refers to himself in the plural. And I document this in my book to Moses, from Abraham to Moses, the prophets, and so forth. This person does not know what he's talking about. And this is what's disturbing to me, because this is why people buy into this, and people who don't know Hebrew, don't know the language, don't understand how Elohim is used, the grammatical context of the verb, how it modifies Elohim. They don't know. They don't know the places, and they don't know where they're at because they can't read Hebrew. And sometimes, a lot of times, the English does not justify, as you can see here, the English did a very poor translation in Genesis 18, 1, 2, and 3 verses, and 19, the second verse, and of course in 19, 18, and also, those main ones, and also in Genesis 20, verse 13, as we just read, where Abraham uses Elohim with the plural verb for the first time in the whole book of the Torah. So this is why I don't understand why people like this will go on record when they don't know the language and they rely on other nonsense scholars and just lexicons to try and justify their cause. They don't know. So this is a challenge to you. I challenge you and anybody else who questions this. You can email me here. You can leave a message here. Email me. Go to my website. You know how to contact me. But you need to look at this first. And if you don't know Hebrew, look at interlinear. It'll tell you the third person plural, they, for what I just said in Genesis 20, verse 13. But before you comment, make sure you look at this yourself, because what I'm saying is accurate to what the Hebrew says, not what this guy says, who does not know Hebrew, does not know anything about it, and will go on YouTube and lie. Or even be ignorant of the fact, well, I like to say lie, strong word, but he doesn't know Hebrew. And he's pretending to know what Elohim really means, and he doesn't. When he says that there's no evidence for Elohim ever being used in the plural for the name of God in any way. And I just showed you the first time Abraham spoke the name, the very first time in the Torah, in the book of Genesis, that Elohim was first spoken was with the plural verb, not a singular. And it's because Abraham encountered the three men who were Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. They were El Adonai in plural form. And there are many sources. I guess I give them a book. I list the sources. I list the text. I even print the Hebrew in there. So, this is more stuff that people who don't understand Hebrew, the Trinity is true in Scripture, revealed from the Torah all the way down, from the book of Genesis all the way down. So if you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe. I hope you got a lot from this teaching. You might have to watch it a few times, but this is a little heavy if you're not familiar with the language, but you can check it out yourself with it online, interlinear, or talk to somebody who knows Hebrew. So again, my name is Dr. Al Garza. This is Bible Answers. I hope you enjoyed this. Please like and subscribe and share it. And we'll see you next time at my next broadcast, challenging some of these false claims of the faith and hopefully bring some light into these false teachings that are out there. So thank you, God bless, and have a great day.
Bible Answers with Dr. Al Garza.